Melissa, how are things in Rochester?
Snowy.
Ugh, cold.
Oh, it's supposed to
How
snow.
about by you?
It's supposed to a little bit tonight, some, not too much.
It's very pretty.
It
Yeah.
is pretty. It is pretty.
If you don't have to go anywhere. Yeah.
Well, even if you're only going out on foot, it's still pretty.
That's true. Yeah.
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 Yeah. As they say, there's no bad weather, there's only bad clothing, right?
Well, Savannah is
Amen
just
to that.
gray. Everything's just gray. It's been gray for days, just gray. And then it rains and then it's gray. It's just been awful. I keep my curtains all closed during the day because it's just so boring outside.
Hey, Randolph. Hi, Amy. Amy Mapes. Okay.
Hello.
It's good to see you two. All right.
Hi, Gennaro. Hi, Carrie.
How you doing, Cary? Okay.
I'm doing great. It's good to see your faces.
Yeah, it's nice to know that you have a haircut, right? Did you? Yeah, exactly.
It looks
But-
nice.
Yeah, you do look nice. Oh my gosh, Jennifer Fandale is joining us.
All
Jennifer.
right, I'll put my video on.
Yes, please do. How's Tyler doing?
He's good.
Okay, all right. I'm going to shut up now because I don't want to usurp anything.
No, I think our numbers have grown, and maybe we'll get started. Do you think so, Alex?
I think so. You're in charge, Katie. So whenever you decide, you just
All right.
hit it.
Well, it's really, really lovely to see everyone's faces, and I'm so happy to be hosting the reading tonight. My name is Katie Hartsock, and I'm a poet who lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I was really honored to have my first book of poems, Bed of Impatience, published by Muse back in 2016. And I was so honored that Alex asked me to host this reading tonight. So just a couple housekeeping items. If everyone would mute themselves and stop their videos. And then I think it's also great if in your upper right-hand corner you set your view to speaker so that the main show is whatever poet is speaking. And I'll do that now too. I want to invite everybody to engage in silent applause after each poet, but I will ask everybody to unmute at the end of our third poet after her reading, and we'll all join in applause together. In the chat, I want to direct you at the very top. There are links to each of our poets, Carrie Green, Hilly Lighthouser, and Sally Thomas, to their author pages on Muse Press, as well as links to ablemusepress.com and the imprint Word Galaxy Press. So that is there for you in the chat. I am so excited to be introducing these three amazing poets whose work I have admired well before tonight. And I remember when I first heard Hailey read, I think back in like 2014, when she won the Dickinson Prize in Chicago, I was just so excited by the sounds and the electricity of language that Hailey brings to the page. And when I've also become reading Sally's and Carrie's work, I just admire these women poets so much, and their themes and their formal dynamics and just the power of their poems. So I'm so glad we're all here tonight to celebrate them and listen to them read. Before I introduce our first reader, who's going to be Hailey, I wanted to let everyone know that the new issue of Muse Review is around the corner with some fabulous writers such as Amit Majmudar, Marley Humans, Wendy Vidlock, Anna M. Evans, and several others. It also includes the winning entries and finalists for the last Able Muse annual contest and the Wright Prize for Poetry and Fiction. And so if you want to receive it as soon as it's released, go to ablemuse.com and follow the subscribe to the print edition link. One more note before I introduce our poets. I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Alexander Peppel. And I think at the last reading, David Alpo, the host, called Alex the able man himself, which I thought was a great epithet for Alex. Alexander Peppel founded and edits Able Muse and Able Muse Press, and also founded and directs the Erratosphere online workshop. His poetry and prose have been or will be published in Barrow Street, River Styx, Measure, American Arts Quarterly, Light, Think Journal, Euphony, Per Contra, Measure, and elsewhere. He edits the Able Muse anthology, which came out in 2010. And I think the press has just completely blossomed since then. And I want to thank Alex for his care and his energy as an editor. And you know, everyone, we could have like a little round of applause for Alex and bringing us all together here tonight. Thank you, Alex. Did you want to say any words, Alex?
Yes, thank you, Katie.
Yes.
I just wanted to say how much I enjoy seeing everyone here tonight. And I was telling the people who came in earlier that it looks like this event is ramping up in interest because we have about 1/3 more than participants than last time. So that's pretty big. And for this reading tonight, I'll have the video maybe by a couple of days after this, so you can, if you join our newsletter, you should be able to get a notice of when it goes up. Oh, yeah, we're still receiving entries for the Able Muse contest, which is the Wright Prize, the book award, and the rest of it. So those of you interested, enter. And also, Cary mentioned the new issue of Able Muse review. I just wanted to remind everybody that submissions are now open for other issues coming up, right? And the submissions open at the beginning of the year and they will go on till mid-July. So if you're interested to appear also, submit your work. And I think that's about it. And without further ado, I will say welcome everyone and thank you for all our excellent readers for tonight. And I'm looking forward to the show. So take it away, Katie.
Thanks, Alex. And thank you for putting together such an amazing group of authors and promoting their wonderful work. You do so much for American poetry. Our first reader is Hailey Lighthouser, and this is her beautiful new book just out, St. Worm. Hilly Lighthouser is the author of Swoop, which won the Poetry Foundation's Emily Dickinson First Book Award, the Towson Prize for Literature, and was a finalist for the Kate Tufts Discovery Award. And she's also the author, as I said, of St. Worm, published by Able Muse in 2019. Her poems appear widely in Agni, Gettysburg Review, Poetry, the Yale Review, and numerous other periodicals, and have been selected 3 times for the Best American Poetry Anthology. She is a recipient of the Discovery the Nation Prize, the River Styx International Poetry Award, the Elizabeth Matchett Stover Award, and 2 individual artist grants from the Maryland State Arts Council. She lives in Maryland, just across the line from Washington, D.C., and teaches occasionally at the Bethesda Writers Center and the Westchester Poetry Conference. Welcome, Hailey Lighthouser.
Hello. Can everyone hear me all right? Thumbs up, yes, no?
Yep.
I don't know why I look like a ghost in this lighting, but I want to thank you all for inviting me to be here and for humoring my ridiculous stage fright by letting me read first. I mean, even sitting here in a ratty old sweater, drinking wine in the safety of my office, I still have to deal with this ridiculous stage fright. I'm going to start with 2 poems from my first book, Swoop. Hold up. Have you ever had a friend going through a breakup? You love them to pieces, but my God, you can't stand to be in the same room with them when they're going through the breakup because all they do is obsess on what's happening. And I had two friends going through breakups at the same time, which inspired this poem, which is called "O Sorrow, O Bother." O sorrow, O bother, a lover who loved her has grown weary of her, has sloughed her and snubbed her and washed his hands of her. So she's sticking a pin again and again in a fiendish maneuver, a re-voodoo do-over, like a perfected known sin, into an intricate doll, its red paper, rather small heart, and all of its parts, its toes and its kidneys, its spleen and its pinkies, the knees and the jigglies, she's sticking and sticking, and all the while thinking and smiling while thinking of how much it must hurt him to be pricked by her pin, to be hung by his thumbs in the spin of her brain, thinking and thinking with unended, unblinking, unbended immersion of the lover who loved her and grew weary of her. Oh, good, I see little hands. Oh, thank you. This is my second Zoom reading, and on the first one, I was totally thrown off by not hearing any reaction from people. So I like seeing the little hands clap. I'll do one more from Swoop. This is called "Oh, She Says." Oh, she says, because she loves to say, oh. Oh, to this cloud break that ravels the night. Oh, to this moon, its mouth full of sorrow. Oh, shallow grass and the nettle burr's bite. Oh, to heart's flare, its wobbly satellite. Oh, step after step in stumbling tempo. Oh, owl and oak. Oh, rout of black bat flight. Oh, moaned an attic in Esperanto. Oh, covetous tongue. Oh, fat fandango. Oh, gnat tango in the hot ochred light. Oh, windward leaves in subtle inferno. Oh, flexing of sea. Oh, stars bolted tight. Oh, ludicrous swoon. Oh, blind hindsight. Oh, torching of bridges and blood boiled white. Oh, sparrow and arrow and hell below. Oh, she says, because she loves to say, oh. Okay, now I will read from St. Worm. Hold up. I don't know if y'all can see the picture clearly, but I love this cover art. The artist very kindly allowed us to have reproduction rights for free. I thought I'd start with a couple poems that first appeared in Able Muse magazine. And this first one, Ribbit. I've always liked this poem. This is the most rejected poem I ever published. I mean, I have a page of rejections on this poem, and I kept sending it out because I really liked the poem. And then I shelved it for a few years, and then when I was putting together the St. Worm manuscript, it fit in, and I sent it out again, and the first person I sent it to was Alex, and he snapped it up. So thank you, Alex. It's called Ribbit. So rarely does music so clearly resemble the creature who makes it. Wrens and sparrows sorrow larger. The giant sloth, Goliath bird-eating spider cry out smaller than they all are. It's only the toad, consigned to her squat, mud-green, pot-shaped house, fattening on flies, who tries a nocturne of such dense remorse that it exhibits commensurate size. And then another one Alex published. It's called the Hangman Song. And one of the many reasons that I am so very strongly against the death penalty, against executions, is not only the death of the person, but the fact that it turns so many other people into killers. The jury, the judge, the district attorney, and the person who actually has to pull the lever, throw the switch, or give the injection. So I tried to, in a rather darkly humorous way, get into the mind of an executioner. And this is the Hangman Song. They say that heaven is sodden with light. Just heaven and earth and 6 feet to go. Just earth and heaven and 10 little toes, ruffled and fluttered in 10 tidy rows. They say that the way is doddering flight, a lurch and a jigger, and left between the clouds and cold ground stays a creaking thing of wood and of air and of greasy string, not collecting the sky, but getting close, with grapple and snow blowing up his nose. Okay, I'm going to read the hippity clap. I'm going to read the title poem, which I have the wrong page number for. So it was on page 24. The worm poems are mostly named after who or what they eat. And I was thinking about how it's always a contradiction that people venerate the bones, the mortal remains of saints. How they keep them in these beautifully ornate marble tombs, and they take oaths on them and run them around town when a war comes. And you know, when they're supposed to be venerating the opposite, they're supposed to be venerating the soul. And especially since I've always imagined saints having, you know, rather spindly little bodies, rather thin bodies. And so I was trying to imagine what the worm would think of the body, since the worm is concerned with the corporeal side of things, and it might have a very different opinion of the saint's remains. So this is Saint Worm. A fate for fleas, perhaps, or nits, but for the rest of us, he was a piteous disappointment. Some skin, more bone, his gut a bust, his cranium a silent drum, his heart already torched to cinders, spent as winter, testicles 2 bitter marbles, the pith of him, all that we found, less a stone, not half a pound. Although I must at least admit, despite the sauce, his milky alabaster box was posh. When I realized that I was going to be writing a series of worm poems, I really wanted to do a bookworm poem, but I didn't have an angle on it. So I went looking on the internet for to find out what kind of worms actually eat books. And I found that the only one that was known to do it was actually the larva of something called a Zestobium rufa villosum. And when I found out that that was the death watch beetle, then I had an angle to write the poem. Bookworm. This is the stuff. The bright purple juice, a pawn of the grape, could blither and faint for, swilling and swallowing, vowel and consonant, macron, haycheck, ogonek, and umlaut, confounding the mouth with curlicue, dot, straight Roman numeral, serif, and loop. This is the gist, salty and sweet, the chewing, the sate, garamond, blackadder, Christina, script. Here is the clam-bake, potlatch, a shinny, a picnic, a barbecue blowout. Stick a fork in it slowly, so slowly, let each perfect word steep brown in its paper. Let paper be pulp, let pulp be pastiche, let grist greet the gullet, fowl bless it solemnly. There's room for us, place, there's space for the ages. We're all scribbled on water. Bring out the dead. That was a poem when I had one of those wonderful experiences that I had no idea how it was going to end. I was doing my list and I was going through, and all of a sudden, as I'm typing the words, I realized what the words were. That doesn't happen very often. It's a very nice surprise when it does. Okay, I'm going to read a poem called Midnight. Midnight's my favorite time of day. I'm a super night owl. And so midnight, the phone stopped ringing, the news is off. I can enjoy my thoughts. I can read, I can watch TV. And one night there'd been this lovely rain all night long and I was enjoying it. And then right at midnight, it stopped, which was kind of disappointing. I was all cozy under the covers, wanting to enjoy the rain. And since then, I started noticing that that the rain always seemed to stop before midnight or start after midnight, which irritated me. So I wrote this poem, Midnight. The problem with midnight is that it never rains then. Not even in spring when the old roots dig in, or in summer when the tangled up woods get angry and the windows are all left stupidly open. At dinner, it softens the pane in a silk gray of mirrors, where sometimes right before dawn, low-lying clouds reconvene in a coven. Lightning quivers and thunder shakes and echoes the timber. But night after night, as the moon weeps the meridian and the soundless pendulum swings midpoint, at the light's most mortal hour, it's a drought, sear as a cottonseed sprout. And you know, as you know your own soul, that that is not right. I'm going to read an acrostic poem called Monster. It's another nighttime poem. I've always felt great sympathy for the monsters, for Grendel and Grendel's Dam and the Frankenstein monster. We're out in the cold when everyone else is inside, all, drinking and eating and carrying on, having a good time. So I decided to voice the monster. Many nights I talked in silence to the stars, only I and the dim, distant fires, none else to throw a shadow on the shadowed ground. Some hearts rest a smaller roof, a closer fire, the warmth of other voices sung to nearer ears. Evening, soft black wool pulled neat beneath the chin. Rain, a bog-bred thief, tethering dark to wind. And then I'll read one. This is for the people who are inside while the monster's out in the cold. This is called Moley's Chair. And the Moley is the character from Wind in the Willows, which I didn't read until a few years ago, which was a lovely surprise. And my favorite chapter is the one where Moley and Ratty, they're out wandering around in the dark on a cold night, and they realize they're near Moley's burrow, and they go in and it's cold and it's dark and there's no food. And then all of a sudden, some mice come singing Christmas carols, and Ratty gives them some money and sends them out to buy food. And then they all sit around and have a good time. And I have a nice big chair that I like to pull in front of the fire and eat and drink in. And so I'm calling my chair Moley's Chair. All for the love and the flutter of a custard, for the slosh of a chowder, its dunk stir and sopping. All for the reverence of bread crust, the palming and weight of an egg with a spatter of pepper, box ground and pungent, freckling and stinging. For the warming of cider with spices and bourbon and butter. And for the love, not less, of the Times and the Globe and a dozen reviews. I call out for the dusk and its dimmet, the casting of flame light, the climbing and etchings of flame light. All for 2 elbows, a lap rug, and grateful repose of untroubled buttocks. I give praise for its cushions, cushion its coil. For a mustard and cracker and dry Spanish port, for the blended deep breath of fruitlessness, sluggardness. I hold in my prayers its tassels and wrinkles, anoint with soft drool its patches and stain, guard in my heart its orange threadbare chrysanthemums, the petals and sepals of each oversized nacreous vein, blanched and embroidered, burst gusset, burgundy rose. And I'm going to read a short poem This is a form I came up with when I was first writing and first learning about form. And I call it the small sonnet because it is, it's 14 lines, but each one is 5 syllables rather than 10. And it has a very strict set of rules that I won't bore you with. This one is called Dumb Luck. When a punch is ducked by a fall down drunk, or the bank is broke by a card shark's blink, then you know it's struck like the tinny plink of a rusted clock. Such a timely plink, and we're back in swank, with our shamrocks plucked, with our baskets dumped, with the caromed crack of a dead stroke whack, and all 8 balls sunk. And then the last poem I'm going to read is called Crows. And this poem came out in the Antioch Review quite a few years ago. And I remember it followed a poem by Deborah Greger called something, England in the Dark Ages, which blew my damn poem out of the water. It was so good. And later at Westchester, I met her and I told her about that. And so when she gave her reading, she read her poem, and then I had to read Crows. But it's still a nice poem, even if it isn't as good as Deborah Greger's Crows. Because they are clever, we believe they are wise. Because they are wise, we conclude they are good or evil, or good and evil, but never muddied in between. Because they are arrant or utter black, we assume them to be downright chummy with death. And so in England once, a woman was pressed between stones for owning a pillow made from crow feathers. This, the people said, gave her the power to dream affliction like moonlight into the lives of their children. And even though during her trial, records show that the streets rang with the din of fact and ruddy lineage, there was still a principle involved. And the city was cheered when no crows arrived at her grave, which was hurriedly and spotlessly dissembled by snow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hailey. That was amazing, and I'm sure Deborah Greger loved your poem. I will go on to introduce our next reader, Carrie Green. And reading Crows is sort of a beautiful throughway into Carrie's book, because this gorgeous collection is titled Studies of Familiar Birds. And I have to say, Carrie, like just this morning was the day the robins decided that the honeysuckle berries were ripe. And so there was this beautiful party of robins just outside our front window, and my son and I watched them, and I had been reading your poems, and it just felt kind of magical. So I imagined a poem of yours existing through my window this morning from this book, which just weaves together animals and human beauty and grief so beautifully. So to introduce Carrie, Carrie Green is the author of Studies of Familiar Birds, Able Muse Press, 2020. She earned her MFA at McNeese State University in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and has received grants from the Kentucky Foundation for Women, the Kentucky Arts Council, and the Louisiana Division of the Arts. Her poems have appeared in Beloit Poetry Journal, Poetry Northwest, River Styx, Flyaway, Blackbird, Cave Wall, Diagram, and many other journals. She lives in Lexington, Kentucky, and works as a reference librarian in a public library. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you for that lovely introduction. It's funny, I actually don't have a poem about robins, and there's probably the bird that I'm familiar with the most. They love my backyard. I do have a poem about crows, but I'm not going to read it tonight because Hailey already read her crow poem. So, well, I wasn't planning on reading it anyway, but you can find that in the book. Thank you, Katie, for hosting, and thanks, Alex, for doing these and all you do for poetry and Able Muse Press. And thanks so much, Hailey and Sally, for reading. I'm also a huge admirer of both of your work, so I'm really excited to be here tonight. my book, many of the poems, and yours won't come pre sticky noted, but mine does. So many poems in the book reflect upon the egg and nest illustrations that Virginia Jones created in the book Illustrations of the Nests and Eggs of the Birds of Ohio. And this is one of them. It was the first book of its kind about American eggs and nests, and it was actually begun by Virginia's daughter, Genevieve Jones. She unfortunately died just a month after the book's first plates were mailed to subscribers at the age of 32. She died from typhoid fever, and her family decided to complete the project in her honor with Virginia, a woman with no experience in scientific illustration or creating lithographs, and really no interest in ornithology, taking on the rest of the illustrations. And this is one of Virginia's illustrations on the cover of the book. And you can just see how miraculous it is, I think. So the first poem I'm gonna read is Ode to a Mourning Dove, and that is the poem, that's the illustration on the cover of the book. Ode to the Mourning Dove. How can we not love your nests? Each twig an offering from male to female as he stands upon her back. Such economy, the way the heft of your bodies molds the sticks. Spare, we should say, not crude, not flimsy. Please forgive us for finding your tiny heads so comical above your plump, delicious breasts. But how we covet the blue rims lining your black eyes, and your tranquil coloring, amid summer's dazzle of emerald and ruby flight. We rest our eyes on the soft grays of your wings, the rosy buff of your chests. But mostly we adore the rattle of wind through your wings, and how, when dawn's chatter rises to cacophony, we can always discern your throat's pulse. O dove, the sweet ache of your lament, teach us to sing our grief. So I'm gonna also next read a couple of poems about my father. Many of the poems in the book are about him. He died of pancreatic cancer when he was 57. I write in form sometimes, and I think that form really helped me control that subject matter and writing about that personal subject. So I'm going to read, because I know so many able Muse poets use form so well. I'm going to read a couple of my formal poems. And this is a pantoum, and it's called After the Diagnosis. And it takes place in Huntoon Island State Park in DeLand, Florida, which is where I'm from. Hailey, I know, is also from Central Florida. We had a nice little chat about that on Facebook. We walked the hammock to the shell mound, my father first on the hard-packed path. Shadows of palms and oaks slanted like rungs, the path a shining ladder through trees. My father led us on the hard-packed path, head down, sharp elbows swinging. Did he see the path shining like a ladder through trees? We followed him through the hush of fronds. Head down, sharp elbows swinging, did he see the red lichen bloom like cells on trunks of trees? We followed him through the hush of fronds and the trunk's stains, bright as open wounds. The lichen bloomed like cells on trunks of trees. The sable palms curved and leaned, their red stains bright as open wounds. Trail ends here. We needed to be told. A sable palm curved and leaned into the wide arms of a dead oak. Trail ends here. We needed to be told. The midden sinks into swampy ground. And this next poem is a sestina, and I've heard from several people since the book was published that this was one of their favorites. Hopefully I will be able to get through it without crying. It's called My Father's Shirts. My father cleared his room the spring he found out. So your mother won't have to, he said, as he opened the metal doors of the closet and rattled the quiet afternoon. He plucked shirts from hangers and held them out to decide which to toss and which to keep. He'd paced all morning, needing to keep himself busy. It was late spring, but the magnolias hesitated, unable to decide to unfurl. The doctor said he still had time. There were so many shirts packed inside my father's closet. He stared into the open mouth of the closet at all the clothes too big to keep. Pants that sagged and bunched, shirts that swallowed him. The warm spring sun filtered through leaves and blinds. He said, it shouldn't be so hard to decide. Why was it so hard to decide? Birthdays, trips, all contained in his closet. Your brother gave me this, he said, of a fishing shirt he wanted to keep. My throat tight, forgetting spring, I filled the bags with piles of shirts. I pictured the racks of thrift store shirts and knew my father was right to decide when he could open the window to spring and brighten the dim hole of his closet. Still, I wanted him to keep everything. You might wear those again, I said. I'll never wear these again, he said, holding up the blue work shirts with Cary stitched in red. We'll always keep those, I said. It was easy to decide to put them back, safe inside his closet, ready to be worn another spring. He died the next spring. My mother said it hurt to open his closet. We pressed his shirts to our faces to decide what to keep. So I'm going to switch back to the Joneses. This poem is called Study for Long-Billed Marsh Wren, and it's actually an imaginary study for another plate. Before she finds the crook and bend of marsh grass, Virginia sketches the mass of yarn and thread that squats like a tumor at the bottom of her sewing kit. A mystery how the skeins unspool themselves into snarls, but here she entwines the crimson grosgrain from Genevieve's best dress with the indigo wool from her favorite gloves, as if weaving a spell for a daughter who loved to unpuzzle the tangles of remnants, whether silk or weed stem, velvet or vine. And this poem is another poem about one of the plates, a black-capped chickadee. And I recently got a bird feeder for Christmas, and we've seen lots of black-capped chickadees lately at the bird feeder. But their nests are not typically, you can't typically view them because they are one of those birds that build them inside something. So this kind of describes that process. Virginia eases the stump open along the seam, afraid the decaying wood might collapse upon its secret. Inside, even the heartwood crumbles. She sketches jagged, illegible rings, the half moon where the birds first tunneled, edges sharp as a bite. Her lines cramp near the tree's disintegrating core. Against the wood's striations, the nest appears in relief, a cloud of moss and down that holds its shape when released from the cavity's embrace. A tree's heart hardens and dies a little each day. How lucky then to have the dust replaced with bits of moss and fur, to begin again with freckle-spattered eggs. And I have a couple more poems. This one is the last poem in the book, and it's called Song for My Father. Father, let us go and find a country church, spare and white, with snug, hard pews. We'll drive out in your Ranger, January's brown fields blurring by, cassettes rattling across the dash, and slip into silence like an old coat. In the gravel parking lot, you'll note the imprint of the rake's tines, and I'll find the graveyard's blue roses almost cheerful. Don't shake your head at the unlocked door. Let's pretend they were expecting us. Inside, our breaths mingle with dust motes on chilly slants of stained glass light. We'll sit on the left, a few rows back, and turn our hymnals to blessed assurance. I'll follow your voice, high and clear, with that touch of mountain tremolo that stayed long after you left. Father, I'll try to hold on as your song swells the rafters like a rib cage and thrums inside my hollow throat as you hold the notes far beyond where I can go. So I'm gonna actually read my last poem. I'm gonna read something more recent that I've been working on recently, and I've found it a little challenging to write lately with everything that's going on in the world, but I have really gotten into erasures lately, and so I've been erasing this book, the Baffle book. It is a book that was published in 1928, and it's mystery puzzles. So each chapter is like a little mystery puzzle that the reader is supposed to solve. So that's what one of them looks like. And this one is called Messer Bellini's Report to the Doge. And thanks to my friend Jeremy Payton, who is here tonight and speaks Italian and told me how to pronounce that title. The Republic met his death wine drunk and lavendered, ate of reason, ate of lavendered harm. I also ate wine drunk from the same table. The gentles poisoned the wine, and all drank and were warmed, and all drank from cups, from the pitcher, from a wineskin, and all did watch, all were openly looking. Soon after, the pain of a lavendered kiss. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carrie. That was such a beautiful reading from your book, and what a cool new project you're working on. And I hope you keep the title The Baffle Book, because there's something baffling about erasure that's also so pleasant too. So that was so cool.
I love that title too.
Thank you so much. I am pleased to introduce our last poet of the evening, Sally Thomas. And this is her new book out from Muse, Motherland. And I always find Sally's poems just full of mystery and the magic of motherhood and the music of all of those things. And I just always have admired, since I started reading her poems, what she does with form and the surprising moves her poems can take in these recognizable constraints that she works through. I will move to her bio here. Sally Thomas's Motherland was a finalist for the 2018 Able Muse Book Award and appeared from Able Muse Press in the spring of 2020. She is also the author of 2 poetry chapbooks. Recently, her short story, A Fire in the Hills, received Dapple Things Magazine's J.F. Powers Prize in Short Fiction. She is the recipient of Wise Blood Books Summer Fiction Residency for 2021. She lives with her family in North Carolina. Welcome, Sally.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie, for that introduction. Thank you so much to Hailey and Cary for your reading. You know, it's always a little nerve-wracking to be last, but you know, it was great just to have to sit here and just focus, and just wonderful to receive both of your poems. So thank you very much. And thank you to Alex for everything that you do, and especially for your design of this beautiful book. This is actually the hardcover edition. It's out in hardback as well. It's been a year and I'm still in love with this cover. So I'm going to start. I told Carrie when we were chatting back and forth that I'd read some bird poems too. A lot of birds tonight. And this one is, well, all of you who are in places like Michigan and North Dakota, or actually cold places, can laugh because I'm in North Carolina and snow weather down here is a little different from snow weather where a lot of you are probably. So anyway, you can laugh at me. But this little poem is called Snow Weather. A falcon on a wire against the laden sky scanned his brown empire with a black ice eye. Nothing beneath him stirred in that sunless instant, but my heart for a keen-eyed bird, blind to me or indifferent. So that was a shorty. The next poem that I'm going to read is also a bird poem. And this one came about because I was trying to write. I write in forms a lot, but I love writing in syllabics particularly. I'm not an especially good metrist, but I really love counting syllables. And so whenever I get, I had come off writing a lot of sonnets, and my, the whole world had this da 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 pulse. So I was looking for other things to do and stumbled on this Vietnamese form that I'm probably going to mispronounce, sorry to any Vietnamese speakers, the Luc Bat, which is pairs of lines, 8 syllables and 6 syllables. And if you do it right, it also has this really intricate rhyme scheme where rhymes repeat at the end of lines and then in the middle of like the subsequent line. And I kind of played fast and loose with that, although I tried to pick up at least the sounds of those rhymes. And that was kind of what moved this poem forward. I didn't know what it was going to be about or where it was going to go. And I was just literally following, you know, counting syllables and trying to follow these rhymes. And that was how I wrote this poem. So this poem is called Mourning with Goldfinches. Last March, too, these pairs came to our feeders. Oh, I should stop and say, I know that a group of goldfinches is a charm, by the way. It's larks that are exaltations, but I needed that number of syllables. So these goldfinches are hybrid larks because they appear as an exaltation. So sorry about that. Mourning with Goldfinches. Last March, too, these pairs came to our feeders in marital exaltations. Quarrel and rapture played daily on our drawn drapes, a theater of flitting shadows. Mornings when we twitched back one curtain, the struck air reverberated, the winged resonance fled. Males were all in patchy gray molt. Gold bled through at each throat. Scattering thistle seed, sparring, they ate while marveling in each other's arms. We watched them. In each other's arms, we watched them, light and leave, brief as light. All living things have the same bright fleetness, though we don't see, we aren't struck by it the same way all the time. It hides deep in some creatures, in us who sleep even when we wake, who lie abed late and wonder too little at shadows that play on the white wall opposite. Too soon they're washed away in darkness. So goes every day, granted its human name. Granted its human name, this day enters. All days answer to their names, given to honor fixed and permanent things. God's sun, moon, immortal shinings in changeless skies. Except skies do change. In the high transept window, clouds gallop, then lay their tumbled white garments down. We sleep, we rise, we die again briefly in sleep. The sky holds our mirror. We see our lives in it, swift as a day, full of wings, trees in flame. Full of wings, trees in flame, like angels, all white light, the spring comes. A sweet beginning, wreathed in bluebells, with sharp weather. Long mornings together, we'll soon hear goldfinches, flinty calls in the cold. Plenty of thistle seed, still they'll fight. We'll smile to recall their shrill back and forth, their scrappy angers, small lordships, their hungers in all things, new, sunlit, nesting, in us too then, resting in our familiar selves at home. In our familiar selves at home, in flesh we wear each day, the strangeness lies. You are the way I live, and what is that? Parryings, laughter, all the bright daily passings away the world's made of. Sweet brevity, newest hour, everything most lovely, most loved goes singing. Shadows wing across light. Curtains drawn still against the night. Let's lie here, you and I, be stirred one more fresh season by brief hungers and succumb. The next poem I'm going to read is a really old one. Thank you. I mean, the poems in this book go back at least 25 years. And this one I wrote 20 years ago at a very different stage in my life when I was asking, I don't know, some existential questions that seem kind of silly to me now in some ways. Like, why was I worried about the things that I was worried about? But I've never read this poem out loud. And it's kind of long, so I'm actually going to skip some sections in the middle. It'll hang together. but we'll see how it goes. This is called New Year's Day, Cambridge, 2001. And we were living at the time, my husband and I, and our first two children who were really little. My husband was doing a PhD in Cambridge, and we were living in this flat, which will kind of figure in a couple of poems, actually, but that's where we are. New Year's Day, Cambridge, 2001. Seagulls surf the wet updrafts over roofs, 100 miles inland. Every weather's a weather of gulls, a scream against the bottled blue or cloud-mottled sky, the one constant besides rain spittling the window. These birds who revel in being blown off course, if they had any idea that is where they meant to go in the first place. I was never a believer in resolutions. What's resolve but another word for wish? Ask the fisherman's wife how far she got on wishes. Would I resolve, say, to let a third child choose itself? What can I say I wish for? Just now, my two already wished for children resolved into flesh gallop down the hall, speaking in whinnies. When I wrench the door open and shout, "Inside feet," they look at me. What are inside feet? We have the same feet wherever we go. Okay, they say. They wait for the door to close. Gallop, gallop, nay, nay. Does control end at conception, or only our belief in it? The rain's tsunami threatens to wash the whole country into its inhospitable hinterland, the sea. We inhabit a culture of rain, learn to speak its commonplaces, welly boots, waterproofs, as if we needed to prove water's existence. We think in a language at once ours and not ours. At breakfast, our son holds up a spoon. What's the English word for this? He won't believe that spoon could possibly be the answer. Somehow we never imagined having to say, take your feet off the celery. Don't lick me. The corkscrew is not a toy. What did we expect? Amnesia, entropy, extend their present tense mercies to our children who are not whatever we dreamed, vague, two-dimensional composites of our childhood photographs, quiet, able to play the piano, so finish what they begin, absolve us of ourselves. In bed, in the borrowed time before the alarm, we hold each other, hoping maybe this time it won't happen. The day will hang back shyly at its own threshold. Even now, the sky is paling, a white sliver between the curtains. 11 years married, are we any closer to knowing what we want? Our wedding vows told us precious little, not what to expect, only to cleave, that strange word that means its opposite. I close my eyes. This could be a stranger's body. My hands move across, mapping again desire's universal alien terrain. Oh, for the wings, but where would I go? Where are you not? All of you, husband, children, calling my name, calling me back from myself, back into myself, erasable only by death. This must be what it means, one flesh. I carry your voices in the pocket of my ear. We speak of making vows, love making, as if such things didn't exist until we think and they occur to us. Morning wind hurls itself against the house, forces rain in through the absence of caulking. In watery daylight, beached raindrops glint like jellyfish along the windowsill. Outside, birds are still free falling like leaves across the housetops, blown away but never out of the sky. Okay, I'm going to read a short poem now. This one is one of a series of sonnets that I wrote at two different points in the last 20 plus years. For the liturgical season of Lent, I've tried to be creative about disciplines that I did. And in 2000, and then again in 2012, what I decided to do was challenge myself to write a sonnet every day for the 40 days of Lent, which means that you write, I can report lots and lots of really bad sonnets, but you get a few good ones out of them, out of the exercise. And this is one of the 2012 ones. It's called Lamplight. Having drawn the curtains, I stepped outside and stood in the dark garden looking in, or not in exactly. The curtains hid bookshelves, wardrobe, mirror, turned back bed, all the room's clear features. Still the linen leaked lamplight, a gold spill on the dry black stalks of black-eyed Susans beneath the window. Behind its veil, the room shone privately, as with a happiness, a mystery to me. I stood outside and wondered at that glow. The night was huge around me, full of stars. More light than theirs seemed hidden in that place, which looked at me, a masked, familiar face. I looked back, night-veiled, strange, and out of doors. I've always thought of that as my Robert Louis Stevenson poem. I guess I read A Child's Garden of verses to my kids when they were growing up. And I don't know, I think I was trying to channel something of his voice when I wrote that one. This next one is another really old one that describes the view out of our front windows in Cambridge. We lived right in the middle of the town. Upstairs, we had a whole floor of this very old building. I mean, rain really did come in through the windows all the time. But the best thing about it was that all our front windows looked out on this big open piece of land. It's called Parker's Piece, and it's like, I don't know, 16 acres or something. It's this big, flat, open public space that traditionally has served as cricket pitches, but it's just this huge park. And it was like, I mean, we didn't have a television and we didn't need one because you could just look out the windows all the time and there would be something happening out there on Parker's Piece. So this is another poem that I wrote about 20 years ago. I spent a lot of time during the 4 years that we lived there looking out of the front windows at Parker's Piece. And this is another winter poem from that time. And we also had a secondary school right behind our building. So school kids show up in this poem, and that's where they came from. And this is called Frost. Sun struck at noon, the stiffened grass stands blades up, hilts down like buried knives that from this window distance simply glitter. Fool's gold, fool's silver, fool's snow. On the roped off cricket pitches, seagulls natter, their scrappy whiteness dark against the whiteness of frost and full bore sunshine. Every shadow shrinks into what casts it. Nothing moves or seems to move, though 3 teenage boys knock a football back and forth. Is it lunch break already? Watched by blue sweat-shirted girls who elbow, laugh, and pass around a smoke. The fag end brightens on their lips. Their small noise splinters on the brittle air. It whirls up in white wing beats and dissolves with a shriek into the sky. Tricky winter light and my own eye bend the world, if not to beauty, then to strangeness, on which the cold sun shines and the grass shines back like knives. Okay, just a couple more here. Let's see. I'm going to read just one from the sequence that ends Motherland. It's a sequence called Rakeldus of Walsingham, and it's a series of poems that are set in the village of Walsingham in North Norfolk in England, which in the Middle Ages was a medieval pilgrimage destination. There's a shrine there, and apparently it was second only to Canterbury in the numbers of people who visited it every year. It was very famous. And so there are various voices that speak through its history in this cycle of poems, but I'm just going to read one right now. This is called All of the poems have an Anglo-Saxon title. The series of visions that resulted in this shrine were experienced by a woman in the years just before the Norman conquest. So I don't know, the Old English is kind of a way of keeping that pulse going through all of the poems. And this one is called Wif, which is woman, and the date is 1349, which was a plague year in England. 30 to my 14, my wedded lord, the church so cold, our white breaths colored the air, small clouds, the shape of words I scarcely remembered afterwards. I was handed onto the horse, which shied beneath me. Its rough, rackety pace bore me east. The hilly road unrolled across a mounded field. Behind me, the long bell tolled. I practiced marriage, learned, then sickness took him. The joiner and the cook died too. I sat beside him through one watery day, then a night so clear I could hear a cock crow across a distant field. His hand cooled in mine, his face stilled into something so unlike itself that I already couldn't see great light behind his eyes, the flush wind raised in his cheeks. Flesh of my flesh, he called me, bone of my bone. Now he's stone. Each morning at Mass, my shadow falls across his staring face, graven into the floor. Once I went back alone and knelt to kiss the polished slab that keeps his bones in place. And the last poem, thank you. The last poem that I'm going to read is a favorite of my mom friends, and I don't know, it's funny, I read this poem once, and there was a particular one of my 4 children who actually asked this question, and I answered it pretty much as the poem suggests. I read this poem once in the presence of my 2 youngest children, and when I was done, one of them turned to the other and said, "Oh, now we know." And I've always wondered what it was that child thought he knew, because I deliberately didn't use a name. So this poem is called For You, for a Reason. For you. Am I your favorite, you want to know? So I say yes, as every breath I take's my favorite breath. If say you're 8, that makes you my favorite 8-year-old. Ditto 765432110. You were my favorite series of summer earthquakes, my favorite live weight centered on the cervix, my favorite sight unseen that year. And so you are my favorite child right now because you stand before me, asking that my heart declare you first, you always. And it's true, it works this way. Love's strange elastic laws grant each child its undiluted part. And that, my love, is what I offer you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sally. That was wonderful. I really love that last poem. I teared up a little, actually.
Read it without crying. I couldn't fold that.
You first, you always. I would love to invite everybody to unmute, and together we can have a live, audible round of applause for our tremendous poets tonight. Thank you so much. That was so wonderful. We are going to open up some time for a Q&A. So I would welcome anyone to unmute themselves and also to start your video so we can see your face as you talk. And I open the floor to questions for our wonderful poets tonight. if I can't tell if someone's trying to talk or not, but I can start us off with a question kind of for Hailey and Cary and Sally. As you all kind of talked about, and as you read, you all work really beautifully in form, but also in free verse, and or at least in maybe invented forms. Hailey, I get the sense that there are intricate patterns and plans in your poems that of your invention. So I would love to hear each of you talk about if it's an intuition that leads you toward a form or towards like more of a free verse as you write, how you make decisions about what to do and also how to play with forms. I noticed in Cary's poems, several of your pantoums relate to the father. And I thought that was such a beautiful connection because there's a sense of returning to him through the poems, that like the repetition in acts. And like Hailey, I noticed that the Hangman's Song was kind of almost a sonnet, but like a refused sonnet, I don't know. And Sally, I would love to hear you talk more about the Vietnamese form and that repetition there, or anything you would like to talk about in regards to freedom and form, please.
I can talk about the Hangman Song for a second, because that was an interesting lesson for me on when to keep form and when to abandon it. And originally when I was writing it started off originally as an acrostic and it wasn't working out. And then I tried doing 9 lines, three tercets, and then I tried doing 3 quartets. I tried doing it as a sonnet length, and I finally realized it wasn't going to go into any specific form. As it is, it's 2 4-line stanzas and then a 2-line stanza. But what I did do after I abandoned the idea of a sonnet or an evenly lined stanzas was I decided to go back and make it a pentameter poem. And that improved it. If I had tried to make it into a sonnet, that hurt it, but turning it into pentameter improved it. So that was a very useful lesson in when you stick with form and when you don't. And my little pithy saying that I say at workshops is that form is an excellent servant and terrible master. And that was a poem that illustrated that for me.
I'll have to keep that one in my back pocket. I like that very much. Very cool. Carrie or Sally?
Well, I'll pick up at that just because what Hailey's describing is kind of what happens for me a lot. Sometimes I will just say to myself, I'm going to write this form. Like when I wrote sonnets in Lent, I'm going to do, 14 lines. They're mostly going to be pentameter. I'm going to mess around with the rhyme schemes, turn them upside down or, whatever. I gave myself a lot of permission to do that, but sometimes that really works, just say I'm going to work in this form. And if I'm stuck, usually the way I can get going, especially when I'm like moving back and forth between fiction writing and poems, like I've been writing fiction mostly since the beginning of the year. I haven't really drafted much in the way of new poems. So sometimes, I have to jumpstart myself. So I'll just pick something that looks like fun, which is how I started writing these Lukebot poems. And I have another one that's like in pieces all over the place where I've tried to do it really strictly. And I don't know, it's just like, it's out of control right now, but it's really a fun exercise. And so just giving myself that, like, I don't know, here are the rules. And I'm free to change the rules. Like Hailey, I might, halfway through it go, this is not working, but this over here might. If I tweak this one thing, then I can do that. And I find that it really helps. Occasionally I will just try. I'll say to myself, I'm just not going to write in any kind of form. I'm just going to write some lines. I'm just going to generate stuff. But then, it'll be the inevitable mess. And that's when I go back and I start trying it. This is what Hailey was saying about, trying it this way, trying it that way, realizing it needed to be pentameter. I might recast the lines in different meters or with different numbers of stresses in the line. I'm a really sloppy metrist, but I'm very accentual, I guess. But I'll play with the line length and the number of stressed syllables, or I'll take something that I think is in meter and I'll turn it into some kind of syllabics, and make myself a rule that way. And eventually, I mean, you know, and it really will be like, no, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't work. And then something will click and suddenly I'll see what's supposed to be in it and what's supposed to be out. I mean, moving from meter to syllabics has been really good lately in terms of just seeing what falls out of the poem because it doesn't fit, you know, or what words are going to work better because they fit the, you know, the number of syllables in the line. So, I mean, yeah, I like Hailey's line too. Form is it's a great servant, and I find it helps me all kinds of places.
And I love syllabics. The first poem I had in poetry was the syllabic. I used to write exclusively in them because I'm a Marian Middle Creek.
Yeah.
And I think they're a wonderful, wonderful way to learn, because I can't scan a poem to save my life. I can't do the meter right, but I can count syllables.
Right. Yeah. And I start to hear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
It did like everything, you know, like when I was writing sonnets, the whole world was 14 lines going da 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 da. But yeah, but I can hear the syllables too. And
I hear pentameter lines on the news. Every once in a while, they will do that.
When I was doing the small sonnets, I did a book of them, and it's a very strict form. There's 5-syllable lines with a very strict rhyme scheme. But I started doing my grocery lists in 5-syllable lines. I realized, I mean, everything became 5-syllable lines then.
That's great.
I think even if you're not going to write in form, it's like artists, they have to learn to do representational art before they can do abstract. And I absolutely think you have to spend a lot of time with form before you can move on to write good free verse.
Yeah.
Even if you throw out all your formless poems, even if they're corny, if they're trite, you learn so much in constructing them that will work in free verse.
Right.
Yeah, one of my teachers, Lorna Goodison, said it's like a carpenter has to know how to build every type of thing, and like, you know, he has to know how to build a bookcase before he can build a bed frame or so, or she has to know how to build a bookcase before she builds a bed frame. And I loved hearing you talk about syllabics, Hailey, because I love to teach arrhythmia in my sonnet sections, and that is so, you know, wild in terms of scansion, but you know, such a cool sonnet to study.
That's why I named it that. You know, I started off thinking I was just going to write a nice little sonnet and some kind of a sort of pentameter, if not iambic, a little trochee, and then immediately it went with the heart of, you know, and so I named it arrhythmia because it was going to have an irregular rhythm.
Which, like, we always love, you know, and delight in. Cary, did you want to jump in on the form or free to first servant master question here?
Sure. I'm trying to think of what I can add to that already great discussion. It's interesting that you pointed out the use of the pantoum and loss. I hadn't really thought of that, thought of it that way. The pantoum is a favorite form of mine, and I think partly it's because you write two lines and you already have the next 2 lines for the next stanza written. But I also like how it's a form that kind of slowly leads you into saying something that maybe you didn't expect, and it's not. It kind of resists narrative, I think, because of that. So I think those are some of the reasons why I'm attracted to that form in particular. Most of the poems in my book are in free verse, but like I said, when I was reading, I do think that using form, and often it was a conscious decision, giving myself an exercise to write about a difficult subject, I think that helped me tackle those subjects.
Yeah. Oh, I love pantoums. I always feel like my brain is in like a rock tumbler and it's going around and around and the same rocks fall down in this pattern, but something gets polished out of it. And I think you're right. I mean, it's, you know, it's hard to imagine how to write about something that you are so emotionally close to unless you have something else to think about other than the thing that you're emotionally close to. And it's like, that's what unlocks the door to the language for all of that to, you know, to be bodied into a poem. But I loved those pantoums in your book. I thought they were great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I loved your thinking about like how they offer you a non-linear way into the poem. It's really, I'm gonna think more about that. I would love to invite further questions from the audience.
I have a question for Sally particularly. I wanted to ask you about switching from fiction to poetry or vice versa. I've been working pretty doggedly on a novel for the past few years, and I've written less and less poetry in that time. And I really want to get back into writing poems. I can't seem to switch gears back. Do you have any advice about that?
You know, I mean, it might just be what, you know, prose is doing what you need to do right now. I don't know. I mean, like if you really want to generate some poems, you know, set yourself some kind of little exercise and just make it an exercise. I don't know. I mean, I wish I could say I had some kind of method. I really don't. I'm just really scattershot. And it's just that sometimes what I want to do, I can't do in a poem, but I can do with a character in a, you know, in a fictional setting. Or I can't do it in fiction, but I can do it in a poem. I don't know. I'm not explaining and I never set out, I never thought of myself as a fiction writer until probably about 7 years ago. It was the first story I ever published. You know, it was not something I ever set out to do, but I just started doing it. And I just kind of shift back and forth. I don't know. I mean, sometimes it really is like what I feel like doing when I get up in the morning. Like I'm sick of writing this prose thing. I'm gonna, you know, write, I'm gonna try a loop bot or something, you know. But I have to have an assignment. If I, you know, that's how I get myself going. Does that answer your question? Sorry.
I've got a question, and it's for Carrie Green. And I was wondering, Carrie, how much of ornithology did you know before going into writing these poems?
Yeah,
I mean, did you have to like delve into it and research it and study it?
I did, absolutely. I was rather like Virginia and Virginia Jones in my knowledge of ornithology beforehand. I mean, obviously, I mean, I've always liked watching birds, but I wouldn't consider myself a bird watcher. So, so yeah, I did a lot of research in writing all of those bird poems. I didn't mention that there is text that accompanies each of the illustration plates that was written by Howard Jones. That's Virginia's son. So I read all of that for each plate that I wrote about. But then I also did a lot of research like on the Cornell ornithology lab website, and in books. I have quite a little library of about eggs and nests now, because it wasn't just birds that I had to learn about, it was their nests and their eggs.
Exactly.
Looking at all of them. So yeah, lots of research.
Okay, thank you very much, Carrie. You guys don't know this, but Carrie and I went to a conference in New Orleans one time. We were graduate students at McNeese State University. And while we were driving into New Orleans, there was a limousine in front of us. And a pigeon had flown in front of the limousine, the limousine hit the pigeon and flew back and hit Carrie's car. I don't know if Carrie remembers that. You don't, I do.
I don't remember that.
All
Maybe it
these
was
feathers.
traumatic and I blocked it out.
Feathers floating around. I'm just glad that you held on to the wheel. All right. You know, crash us. All right. So thank you, Carrie.
Thanks, Gennaro.
Leave it up to me.
Yeah, I'm surprised that's not a poem in the.
Sounds like it's no accident that Carrie is a research librarian. Is that what I heard?
Yes, she is.
Yeah, I'm a reference librarian at a
Oh,
public
reference.
Yeah.
So you're used to digging for more knowledge and information.
I like doing the digging, yes. I mean, I think it's an important part of my writing process is research.
I write sort of pop culture. I have a lot of pop culture in my poetry and with other cultural references. And it's been quite a pleasure to have the internet right there on my screen as I fiddle and diddle with my long and windy poems. So, yeah.
Yeah, that can be also a curse sometimes too. To have it, so.
I am cursed, it's true, yes.
Seems like the Hailey's pithy saying would also apply to like the internet as source. Excellent servant, terrible master, right?
Well, I was a reference librarian also. That was my last job before I retired. And I became a reference librarian solely because I figured whatever job I get, I can still use these skills to help me write poetry. And also Marianne Moore was a librarian, so anything she did, I like.
Yeah, I love that we have that in common too. I think there are quite a few poet librarians. I guess, you know, most poets have to have another job, and librarian is a pretty good one to have.
Yeah, hi, this is Ellen. I just want to say I'm a librarian too. So nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have time for one more question before we say a final farewell. And if not, then
Oh, no, I've got a question.
Okay.
What are your writing schedules like? When do you get the time? When?
I couldn't become a writer until I retired. I went through at least a 20-year writer's block. And I was so fortunate to be finally in a position. And after 20 years of not being able to write, I inherited some money and I knew I was going to quit my job in a year. And about 3 months before I quit my job, boom, I started writing out of nowhere. I was standing at a Van Gogh exhibit and poems started visually appearing in front of my eyes. My last 3 months at work, I did nothing except write poetry. I was terrible. And I am so envious of people who can hold regular jobs, because when I'm writing, it's like I write for 16 hours, sleep for 3 hours, write for 16 hours, and then don't write again for 2 weeks. And so how you work that around a 9-to-5 job, I have no idea. And I am incredibly amazed by everybody else in the world who is able to write and hold a regular job at the same time.
All right.
I mean, it is difficult, but I think one of the great things about my graduate program and Genera's graduate program was we really got hammered in that you have to write every day and you have to write in the morning before everything else starts. And that's a habit that I try to keep. You know, it's some days you can't do it, but that's what I do is try to get in some time in the morning.
Are you a morning person?
No, not at all.
That's funny because Scott has told me that you're very dedicated, getting up early. So I find that surprising that you would say that you're not a morning person. Has told me so many times that you get up every morning.
Well, that makes me even more dedicated because I'm definitely not a morning person.
Well,
unless Scott is lying, you know.
Well, for me, yeah, I have been bringing up children for 27 years, so I guess that was my version of a full-time job, and it's the same kind of thing. I went through long years especially when my kids were little, when I just, I just didn't write much. If I did write little things, I didn't send it out. So it's only been in the last few years, as my last kids have grown up and become independent, that I've been able to get more work done. And I do write every day. It's not always like a writing project. That probably doesn't make sense, but I don't know. Lately, my schedule has been that I don't write first thing in the morning. I get up and read the news and play pangram games and then read for a while. And usually that gives everybody else in my house a chance to leave, which is, it turns out that makes a big difference. If everybody goes away, I'm a lot more productive. So yeah, so I usually try to just like read and think and stuff. And then, maybe around lunchtime is when I will sit down and try to work on something. And then go for a walk and think about it. But I'm not very disciplined. I get stuff done, but I couldn't tell you how I really get it done. Just, I don't know.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your schedules and like the insights into your work. This has been such a delight to be with you all, and thanks to our audience, and thanks to Alex Peppel. And I look forward to seeing everyone at a future Able Muse reading. We can have one final round of applause for the night. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
For coming. Yes. And I also urge you to support our readers and those of you who can get their books at Able Muse Press or wherever books are sold. So thank you all for showing up, and I hope to see you at our future events.
Only if Carrie's in it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting this. This is great.
Thank you to all our fabulous readers, Sally, Hilly, and Cary. And of course, a fabulous hosting job.
Thank you. And again, and thanks Sally, Cary, and Hailey, and thank you, Alex. This was such a pleasure.
Yeah, can't forget. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Have a good night, everyone. Take care.
Good night.
Good night.